If you stick around to the end of this video, I'm going to play a news clip that shows some of the political unrest that's going on around the globe. So stick around. Thanks. Hey guys, so today I want to talk to you about the geopolitical conflicts going on around the world and all of the potential hot wars that are getting ready to gear up and go, and several other political issues and economic issues going on around the world in different governments. So in order to do that, I want to go to the Bible in Luke 21:25, and we'll read from the interlinear word-for-word translation of the Bible in Luke 21:25. This is speaking of the end times and the geopolitics of what the world will be in the end times. It says, "And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and upon the earth distress of nations with perplexity, the roaring of sea and rolling surge." Or how the King James puts it is the sea and the waves roaring. When you look at this word perplexity here, and you go into it, it says as the origin from the same as aporio, which is a quandary. If you look at that, it means to be in a state of perplexity or uncertainty over what to do in a difficult situation. So we're going to go from there to look at some of the geopolitics of the world right now. I'm going to take you to a few screenshots. So we'll start in Israel. They have a gas rig off of the Mediterranean that is about to start pumping natural gas out of the Mediterranean Sea, and Hezbollah is trying to say that they have moved or that the border, the maritime border there, in where the Karish gas rig is about to pump, is in Lebanon territory. Which is total false. They just they want to move their borders so that Israel can't pump there. But anyways, America has an ambassador over there that is trying to work out maritime borders with them, but Hezbollah is threatening to strike Israel over this. And if they do, Hezbollah has 150,000 rockets, and I can't remember the exact quantity, but it's in the tens of thousands of precision-guided missiles at this point. So if they start to strike, it will be probably the biggest battle that we've seen between Israel and any of the militia groups over in the Middle East so far. But, so that's an interesting one that we should be watching. We've got, next, we have Iran, or Iraq. Iraq has moved into a civil war of sorts because they, sorry about that, because they had a Iranian-backed politician that was elected, and he was supposed to be entering into parliament, but they ended up, the anti-Iranian-backed militia or people in Iraq basically said no, and they went and took over the parliament and started bricking it off, and they so they ended up going just recently into a battle with the supporters of the guy who was elected, but because the guy who was elected said he's stepping down, he's not gonna go in and be instated into the parliament. So there's been a bit of battling going on there, and it's only getting worse. So the interesting thing here is the fact that Iraq is the one land base or land position that is not controlled in that area by Iran, and they're saying now basically Iraq is going to be controlled by Iran. And the reason this is interesting is that is the last place that if Iran controls it, they can literally march their army through land territory straight from Iran through Iraq, through Syria, and into northern Israel. So this is a key thing to watch here. Now, staying in the Middle East, we've got a situation in Libya that has heated up over the last couple of weeks. We have two sides of government there. One's backed by the Eastern governments, and one is backed by Western governments. And these two groups are in civil war right now, fighting over who is going to control the country in Libya. So there's been a bloody startup of a civil war there. And just this weekend, it says right up here that 32 people were killed and 159 injured in clashes just on Saturday alone. So that's not looking good so far. Go over to Ethiopia. This is a war that is a hot war that has been going on for quite a while. This has been going on for several years, actually, and not very many people talk about it, especially in the Western media. You'll find Al Jazeera talks about it a lot, but that's not really a Western media site. But anyways, the Tigrayan rebels are clashing with the Ethiopian government and have been for quite some time, and there's a huge amount of brutal things going on over there. We're talking women and children raped, murdered, beaten, and these are the civilians over there. They're not even involved in the clashes. They're just getting ran over by the Tigrayan rebels. So that's a sad situation. They're talking about peace talks. I don't see it happening, but we need to pray about the fact of that coming to an end, because this is probably one of the more brutal ones that's happening in the world right now. Now, Armenia and Azerbaijan are going at it again. Azerbaijan is attacking Armenia. They just, this is actually fresh today, they started striking in Armenia again. They have been doing strikes here and there over the last, I want to say 3 weeks. And so the Armenians are having to evacuate the area where they're being attacked. So that's another development, I guess. Then we go into the results of what happens when the World Economic Forum gets a hold of governments around the world, and they try to influence them. Now, this is happening all over the globe. All of these countries are involved in this. Sorry about the ads here. Let's see if I can get rid of it. There we go. But anyway, they're trying to I just messed up, didn't I? But they are trying to make it so that people, or so that countries abide by an economic, social, and governance score. If you look up, if you just go to your local bank website and type in their search bar, say ESG, I guarantee you your bank has a statement on ESG. Every one of the banks in the Western world has ESG set up in it now, and it's only a matter of time before they give every citizen an economic, social, and governance score. So you will be judged by kind of like the Chinese right now, how they have a social credit score. That's how the ESG score would work. And so in Sri Lanka, how it worked is and this is basically what the World Economic Forum wants, and this is what they will end up getting because it's biblical. The entire country has gone completely bankrupt, and they ended up having the president flee the country, and because the citizens of the country stormed the presidential palace and were swimming in the presidential pool and all that because of the fact that they hold on because of the fact that they were put into such a impoverished situation because of what their government did. They shut down all of the farmers through cutting off their fertilizer supplies. They cut off oil and all of the fossil fuels. And so they ended up going completely bankrupt, and the citizens are protesting and they're starving to death because they are so broke that the government can't even bring in oil or anything to try to salvage the country at this point. So it's a sad situation, but this is what they want for the entire world. The entire government collapsed there, and that's what's going to happen all over the place. And then we go to the Dutch farmers in the Netherlands, and they are going into the same situation where the Dutch are restricting the access to fertilizers for the farmers, and the farmers are protesting, and there's actually been instances where the police have shot at the protesting farmers simply for protesting, and that is how they will end up shutting everyone down. If you try to protest or go against what the government wants, they will just shut you down with force. So, and this is going to end up happening across the globe. But the farmers are not going to be able to, we're not able to do any crops because of the fact that they were not allowed to get the type of fertilizers they needed, because in order to comply with ESG standards, they had to shut down certain types of fertilizers, which are the most essential fertilizers for crops, making it so that the crops could not grow. And so there was no point in them even trying to plant the crops if they weren't going to go anywhere. So next we'll go to the China and Taiwan situation. So Taiwan tracked 8 Chinese military aircraft and 5 naval ships around the country this weekend. Hold on. So this is another just provocation of the Chinese. They're just trying to, see what they can get away with. One of these times when they send aircraft or ships over there, they're not going to be just doing drills and whatnot. They will eventually send a full force across the 80-mile Taiwan Strait. So when they send their army across, it's only 80 miles at the shortest point between China and Taiwan. So that's not very far for them to have to just ship a few bodies over to Taiwan to fight. So the interesting part about this one is when this happens, the Biden administration is super confused on what they are putting out that they're going to do. They are sending politicians over there all the time and doing and trying to provoke a hot war because they're warmongers. That's what they want to do. They want to create war, and so they're trying to get another hot war going, and so they're sending all these politicians over there for photo ops and all this stuff. And Taipei is going to be the ones to suffer the consequences for it, which is the capital of Taiwan, if you didn't know. But they're going to be the ones to suffer. The people of Taiwan are going to suffer. They are going to be massacred in mass quantities. And when this happens, if America gets involved, which the Biden administration, one day they'll say, no, our position hasn't changed. We're just supplying weapons for defense of Taiwan. But then the next day they say, no, we stand with Taiwan, and basically say that if China attacks Taiwan, then we're going to get involved. If that happens, that's going to be a declaration of war against China, and China will see it that way, and then China will go to war with America, and that is a fight that we do not want, because if they go to war with us, they will not hesitate to actually invade America. So they will come across the Pacific and invade America from the Pacific, and then they are also allies with Russia, who hates us because for good reason, because of everything going on in the Ukraine war. And so Russia could very easily pull back from Ukraine at that point and then come in from the Atlantic, and we would get invaded from both sides. Also, these are two nuclear countries that we're having conflict with, which they will not hesitate to use their nuclear weapons against us if they feel threatened. Let's see. Then we go to the Biden administration. Okay. This speech that happened a week and a half ago, where he has military in the background. He has Marines in the background. This is not a standard speech. Usually when you're doing an address to the country, you do not have military standing behind you unless you're planning on showing your force that you can use against your opposition. So he has Marines standing behind him, saying he will use, and this is basically what he's implying, is he will use the full force of the military. And even in a speech before that, he said, if you want to stand up against the government, you're going to need an F-15. Well, I'm sorry to say, but we don't need F-15s, because manpower in mass quantity is more powerful than an F-15. So, or F-15s. But nonetheless, he's trying to provoke a civil war. He's trying to provoke a response. If he's not careful, he's going to get one. And I'm not saying that I necessarily want that, but at one point or another, Americans have got to say enough is enough. We can only be called domestic terrorists and insurrectionists and all that for so long before you have completely alienated an entire population of your own country. So if you're going to alienate us and say that we are an enemy of the state or a domestic threat, then at one point it just becomes a necessity to rise up. Simple as that. Now, speaking of the Russian and Ukraine war, this is one where I view it differently than most people because I've done my research. Now, the Western media will tell you that Ukraine is making this massive counteroffensive, and you're in the AP news right here, and it says Russia hits power stations after Ukraine counteroffensive. Now, the AP is a very liberal news agency. They are going to tell you, Ukraine is, gaining back all this ground and stuff like that. If you actually do your research, they have their times where they push Russia back a little bit, but then Russia just pushes right back and gains the land back, or gains that territory back. So this is one where you definitely have to watch for yourself what's actually going on and do the deep digging, not just watch the Western media, because they won't tell you what's actually going on. For instance, when they got all of these missiles from the US, they started striking deeper into Russia. Well, Russia is like, fine, if you want to do that, just like this weekend, or I think it was yesterday, they launched cruise missiles from the Black Sea and hit 2 or 3 power stations in Ukraine. And so they are knocking out the power now to Ukraine. And if you look at the fact that they have already they cut the Nord Stream 1 pipeline completely off now. So they have cut Europe off of any oil supply. They have also cut all the power output from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which is the largest power plant in all of Europe. And so they've cut that off. They've cut the Nord Stream 1 off. They're knocking out power stations in Ukraine right now. They have literally said they will let Europe freeze through the winter, and they fully intend on letting that happen. And so countries like Germany are pretty much fully dependent on Russian fuel for their heat. Places like Sweden, I believe it is, have told their citizens they have lifted their ban on going out and cutting trees down for firewood, so that people can actually go out into the woods and cut their own firewood, cut trees down and make their own firewood, because they know that they're not going to have enough power this winter for people to heat their houses. So people will literally start freezing to death, especially in Germany. Trump tried to tell the Germans at a UN assembly that if they didn't change direction, they were going to be completely dependent on Russian fuel, and that's where they were at, and they laughed at him. And that's where they're at right now, and I bet they're not laughing anymore, because now they literally have no way to have energy for the winter, and so they're going to end up freezing to death. A lot of them are. And the sad thing is it's not the elites there and the politicians that are going to suffer, because they'll make sure that they have the fuel for them, but not for the citizens of the country. So it's pretty sad. And that's the hard part, is all of these countries, all of these things that I'm showing you are all decisions made by the politicians in those countries or in Western countries that have decided to do this or that in order to bring in a certain agenda. Well, the only people suffering in those is the citizens of the countries. So it's just tearing apart citizens right now. So we've got the Israeli government failed recently, and we know that. So they are at a kind of a vulnerable point, but the Biden administration seems pretty set on getting an Iran nuclear deal back online, but it's a worse deal that is going to ensure Iran gets more nuclear weapons in the end, and they're too late anyways. They already have the 90% enriched uranium, enough for at least 4 bombs, they say, and I think they already have 4 bombs, 2 to 4 bombs. So they do. I don't think they have it assembled to the ballistic missiles, because if they had it that far, Israel would already have attacked. Now, that's what this is saying, is this Knesset member, the Knesset is the Israeli parliament, this Knesset member is saying Israel will attack Iran if necessary. Well, they've been saying that for a long time, but it's coming down to the wire where they are going to have to make a move here very soon, or else Iran, all they have to do is assemble the bomb. They have the ballistic missile tech. They have the 90% enriched uranium. I believe that they have either a nuke, or they have to just simply assemble the nuclear warhead to the ballistic missile, and they're just waiting on the orders from the Ayatollah to do that, which is the religious leader who controls the Iranian government. Nothing in Iran happens without the consent of the Ayatollah. So, one of the reasons the Iran situation is so dangerous, and why you cannot allow Iran to get a nuclear weapon if you don't know the doctrine of the of Iran, of the Islamic whatever Islamic faith, they not the Sunnis but the Shiite believe that that in order to bring in their Messiah, which is the third Imam or their Mahdi, is to have the world in chaos, and they believe that they have to that they're supposed to bring the world to that point of chaos so that their Messiah can return or can come. So that's what makes them so dangerous, is the fact that they will do it just to bring in their third Imam. So you have to watch Iran, because they are a major player right now in what's going to go on. And they're one of these days I'm going to do a video on the Gog-Magog war, where Russia, Iran, and Turkey come in and invade Israel from the north. It's kind of interesting that all three of those countries are stationed in Syria right now on the northern border of Israel. And not only that, but with Iran taking control of Iraq, they're going to have a land bridge all the way to Israel, to the northern border of Israel. And then Russia is already there and has their naval base in Syria. And then Turkey is in Syria right now too. Plus, the three presidents, Erdogan, Raisi, and Putin, all met just I think it was a month ago or a month and a half ago, and met in Iran, and they were working on their relations, and there's pictures of them all shaking hands in agreement. And so that's a very interesting battle to watch, because that one could ensue very soon, just because of if Israel were to strike Iran, then these three could decide at that point it's time to come in and take out Israel. And so the other thing is right here is Iran says it has developed drones designed to hit Israel's Tel Aviv and Haifa. So they're suicide drones, I believe. And so they have, they're suicide drones. But yeah, right there, suicide drones. And so they plan on launching these suicide drones that they can just shoot off and then smash them into buildings, and there'll be actually precision guided missiles, because they'll put bombs on them, and then they'll be able to control them and hit them directly from or direct hits on where they want to hit. So that's also an interesting development. Then, I mean, I could hit on several other things. There's unrest going on in Nigeria, in South Africa. There's massive unrest going on in Europe, all over the place, because of the for one, the political situation over there, and two, the fact that the reason they're not able to get the reason they're not able to afford a lot is because of the inflation there of the from being cut off of being cut off of Russian fuel. The inflation is so intense that people's electric bills have gone up something like 1,000% or something like that. It's absolutely crazy. People are getting like $10,000 electric bills. And so there's massive civil unrest going on over there. And we all know that, in Canada, they had the trucker protest this year. We had a trucker protest in America. We have seen major civil unrest in South America, in multiple countries down in South America. We have seen civil unrest in Mexico. There is horrible weather events going on all over the place, because that's another Bible prophecy video that I'll do another time. But and so people are losing everything that they have, especially in places like Pakistan. The flooding in Pakistan is just absolutely astonishing to see on video. So there's tons of things going on around the globe, and people are losing their minds. And when the one way that they plan on taking down America from the inside is by doing things like they did this week in Illinois, where they have, or this past weekend in Illinois, where they have decriminalized a bunch of major crimes. And so there's all these people that are going to be let out of jail once this goes into effect January 1st, 2023. And I mean, these are major crimes. Illinois will be unlivable. And so when you get civil unrest or you allow crimes to happen in a society, then the society starts to collapse, just completely collapse. And you're seeing that in all the inner cities. The inner cities are all just being, the crime is through the roof. They're having huge, massive homeless problems and everything else. So we're seeing a ton of geopolitical threats, along with just political idiocy throughout the entire globe. And so when you consider all of that, and you consider how many other prophecies are coming to pass at the same time, you start to realize just how close we are to the end. So in conclusion, if you aren't saved, is basically, it's just the ABCs of salvation. For one, accept that you are a sinner, and then believe in your heart that God raised Jesus from the dead, that Jesus went to the cross, died a brutal death, was buried, and God rose him from the grave on the third day, as it is written in the scriptures. If you believe that, and then you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord, Romans 10:9 and 10 says you will be saved, and you will be sealed until the day of redemption. I hope you guys found this informative, and I'll see you later.
Months, the island nation of Sri Lanka has been staring at uncertainty. The country's president, Gotabaya Rajapaksa's rule has drawn to a close following a people's uprising. Sri Lankans have been struggling with soaring inflation, shortages of basic amenities, including food and fuel. They have been facing daily power cuts. The country has gone bankrupt with no foreign currency left. Bad policy, bad politics, and corruption led to a severe economic crisis and a country seething with anger. President Gotabaya Rajapaksa has departed, and Ranil Wickremesinghe has taken over as the acting president. The country is likely to get a new president on the 20th of July, but right now there is a potential power vacuum in the country. It needs a functioning government to tackle the financial crisis. An economic crisis triggering a political chaos. This scenario is not just limited to Sri Lanka today. From Asia to Europe to Africa, several countries are slipping into disarray. Within South Asia, another country is struggling with a serious economic problem. That's Pakistan. The country is cash-starved. Inflation has been rising. The currency is losing value, and external debt servicing is rising. Its foreign reserves are depleting fast. Last month, the State Bank of Pakistan's foreign exchange reserves fell to single digits. The country has pinned its hopes on the IMF package. The worsening financial situation is pushing the Shehbaz Sharif government to the edge. Sharif's coalition partners are miffed. Some allies have been criticizing the government's decisions in the parliament, claiming they were not being taken on board in important decision-making. The ousted Prime Minister Imran Khan, who Shehbaz Sharif blames for emptying the coffers, has also been on the offensive, taking on the government over its inability to deal with the financial crisis. The situation in Europe is also turbulent. In the UK, Boris Johnson is on his way out. The Tories are hunting for a new party leader, and Britain is waiting to get a new Prime Minister. There are several factors that led to Johnson's fall, including a series of sleaze scandals and, of course, the Partygate row. But rising cost of living was also among the top ones. Britain's former finance minister Rishi Sunak, who is now in the prime ministerial race, had quit from the position over scandals plaguing the Johnson cabinet. The new finance minister, Nadhim Zahawi, has inherited a crisis-hit economy. The worsening cost of living crisis is pushing the UK economy into recession. Earlier this month, UK inflation hit a 40-year peak of 9.1%, and the level is set to hit double figures this year on soaring energy and food prices. In Italy as well, an economic slowdown has led to a political crisis 10 years after Prime Minister Mario Draghi pledged to do whatever it takes to save the euro. The country is in the midst of a debt crisis, and Draghi has offered to step down. The coalition partner, Five Star Movement, is saying that it is against the government's economic aid package, and that enough has not been done by Draghi to tackle the cost of living crisis. The escalating political crisis coming as the country stares at a risk of recession. In the Baltic, Estonia is battling a similar crisis. In the latest, the president has asked the prime minister to form a new government after she tendered the resignation of one of her one-party minority cabinet, ending the political stalemate. The political crisis triggered after coalition parties in the government had substantial differences over spending amid increasing cost of living. The inflation rate in Estonia is the highest in the 19-nation Eurozone. The annual inflation hit 22% in June this year. High energy prices are one of the main causes of inflation in the Baltic nation. On to Africa now. The once flourishing West African country of Ghana has turned to the International Monetary Fund for support. It is seeking a bailout as angry citizens take to the streets protesting against high inflation and weak growth. The protesters say they are trying to wake up a sleeping president. On to South America now. Last week, Argentina's economy minister resigned and amid deepening tensions with the government and soaring inflation. Guzman had led negotiations with the IMF to restructure the country's $44.5 billion debt. The internal divisions within the coalition government pushed Guzman to step down, which escalated the political crisis for the debt-laden country. Though Argentina has a new economy chief, the economy is still in tatters. Inflation is spiraling, markets are tumbling, and the pressure on the peso is only mounting. The World Bank says for many countries, recession will be hard to avoid. It blames global supply chain disruptions, the pandemic, and the war in Ukraine for the current economic crisis across countries. And this economic crisis, cutting across borders, has sharpened the domestic political fault lines.